Hi, welcome to our webinar titled Living with PNH, panel of PNH panel perspectives. Thank you for joining us. My name is Leigh Clark, patient educator, and I'll be moderating the presentation today. As we get started, I'd like to recognize the generous support of our corporate sponsors and the generous support of our patients, families, and caregivers for supporting the program today. Due to the high volume of teleconferences on the internet, it is possible that you may lose your connection during the program. If you are unable to view the webinar online, you can call in to hear the audio portion of the program using the call-in number in your reminder email. Today's program will be archived to our website within 2 to 3 business days. You will be notified by email when it is live and ready for viewing. Immediately following the presentation, there will be a question and answer session. Excuse me. Please feel free to submit your questions at any time during the presentation. Oh, pardon me, I'm so sorry. To submit a question or a comment, open the Q&A window in the lower part of your screen. Type your question in the small text box window, and when you have finished typing, just hit enter. We'll do our best to get to everyone's questions today. When asking questions, I do ask that you do 2 things to help us manage the incoming questions. First, submit your entire question all at the same time. Second, please do not share any private health information in your question. Our speakers are not healthcare professionals and cannot answer any specific questions related to your health care. Today's panelists, we have Marlena Connor and Jessi Hackney. Welcome, Marlena and Jessi.
Hi.
Hi, everybody.
Thank you for joining us. We're so glad that you guys are here. I'd like to start out giving you guys an opportunity to introduce yourselves to everyone.
Sure. I'll
Marlena,
go
would you like to start?
Sure. My name is Marlena Connor. I am a PNH patient. I feel a little bit like an old timer. I've been living with PNH for 15 years now. And I had aplastic anemia before I had PNH. And I started the online support group, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. I'm also involved in the walk that takes place in New York every year. So glad to be here.
Thank you so much, Marlena. Jessi?
Hi, I'm Jessi Hackney, and I have been diagnosed with PNH for, I just celebrated 6 years. I am part of the, which I will also talk about later, part of the PNH patient committee, and have been doing that probably going on 4 years, maybe. I think I've been doing that, so.
Thank you so much. And being diagnosed with PNH, it was, I'm sure, very difficult to find supports. Finding someone that was also diagnosed. Marlena, you had mentioned about starting the online group. How did that transpire, and how did you get that started, and why?
Sure. Well, when I was first diagnosed with PNH back in, 2005, it was still kind of early days for Facebook. Nowadays, there are tons of online support groups on Facebook. At the time, it really wasn't the case. And the group I was involved in was a different web-based community called PNHdisease.org. And I got great advice from people, really, really valuable information just after diagnosis. And it was really a vibrant community. But you know, things were changing, and there were more and more people going online, and that group was the technology was getting older. And so just decided to see what would happen if I started this group and called it PNH Patient Support. And so it's been a very gradual build. People would find it and tell someone else that they meet at a conference, like a patient family conference or whatnot. And it just kind of grew over time organically. And that's why I started it. There was a need and the other site wasn't really operating as well as it used to. So it kind of, the group moved over.
And is the group just for patients or family members welcome also?
It's for family members as well. I don't love the word caregiver, but it is for caregivers as well. Loved ones, if you are involved in the care of somebody with PNH, close to someone with PNH, you are definitely welcome to join. And it's a very valuable site for anyone who's involved in the PNH diagnosis or care.
And how many participants are on the or participate in the group? How many would you say?
I should have been prepared for that question. Yeah. I think it's, I want to say 1,500 people. And
okay.
The other thing that's changed over time that's worth noting is we started out as a US only group, and then someone would find us and we'd be like, "You're from Australia? How cool." So it has become an international crew, which is wonderful, but also very interesting. Sometimes it's a little confusing because somebody will say, "I got this notice," and we're like, "What happened? Where?" And they're like, "No, I live in Belgium." So you're like, "Oh, okay, that's nothing I need to worry about." But yeah, so it's over. I think I want to say it's 1,500. So that it's a nice size group.
And Jessi, I know you participate in the group. Or what kind of topics do you guys find that participants are discussing or want to know about? Like, what are some of the topics that get discussed within the group?
I think oftentimes I quite frequently see new patients that pop on that found out about this support group, and they'll bring up a question. Hey, has anybody else ever been diagnosed with AA prior to being diagnosed with PNH? And so then, people jump onto that thread and answer those questions. I think that probably happens. I notice that happening a couple times a week. I mean, at least once a week, there's somebody new that I feel like that posts a question about a loved one or themselves. The drugs that are kind of coming down the line, we talk about those, and there's articles that are posted about those. I know that this was talked about. So even mentioning different ways that they can find additional support has been mentioned. So it really truly is a wealth of information, and a lot of people that are on there that are willing to offer any advice that they possibly can, and even link up with you if needed.
Great. And to join the group, I know it's a closed private group. Marlena, do you have some things in place that protect patients and their families for joining the group? What are kind of some of the security aspects that you all have put in place?
Sure. That is actually one of the most important functions that myself and our moderators have to deal with on an ongoing basis. And I have to give a shout out to Michael Nover, who is is like my right hand. And what's great is I'm on the East Coast and he's on the West Coast. So when I'm sleeping, he'll say, "Hey, this thing, and we should talk about this." So it's great. And he's great. But it's important. It can be difficult because we have decided to let in loved ones, spouses, parents, children. We have to make sure someone is bona fide, or as much as we can tell, a real PNH patient or related or caring for one. So we generally, we have a set of questions that people must answer, or I will hit and Michael will hit the delete button. They will not get in if they leave the questionnaire blank. They have to explain their connection to PNH disease, and just tell a little bit about themselves, as well as their location, I believe. And also we recently asked for phone number. If, I haven't had to call a patient yet, so some people are freaked out by that request. But if we, for example, go on Facebook, and we've had people sign up so they could spam the group. So we tend to take a quick look at the profile of the folks who are applying to join the group. And if we see anything that's just weird, we will say, hey, can we chat? Sometimes we'll follow up and ask somebody a few more questions. I think, and the reason I think that's just so important, and most of our members would agree, I think, we are very honest with each other. We talk about a lot of things. There's really almost no topic we won't go. Jessi, do you agree? Like,
Oh, yeah.
we will talk about women's things.
Yes,
We
I
will
was gonna
talk
say.
about, the only thing we're not allowed to talk about is religion or politics, please.
Right.
No. But we will, sometimes people who are putting on a brave face to their family like to come in the group and say, this has been the worst day ever and I could use some encouragement. So it's important that it be a safe place, so to speak. So that's why we try and be rigorous about our vetting.
Are there any specific rules that folks need to follow in the group regarding certain postings? Do you guys have like some do's and don'ts that anyone listening may want to know about? And you've mentioned a few times about the moderating. What is that, and what does a moderator do? How do they help you with keeping the group safe?
Sure. The rules are pretty simple. There's like a list of 5 things. It's one of the most important ones is just be kind. Always be respectful of other people's opinions when they don't agree. We talked about no politics, no religion. It just doesn't end up in a good place because people end up just like the old saying, you don't discuss those things in polite company. It's just stick to PNH, stay on topic. And it's really not that unreasonable. I think we adhere to the same standards as most Facebook groups do. And we always look for best practices actually for other Facebook groups. So.
I know the group is a PNH group, but for somebody maybe who has an overlapping disease such as aplastic anemia or MDS, are they welcome to join the group as well?
They have to have a connection to PNH. If they have aplastic anemia and really want to join our group, I suppose we would probably allow it, as long as, I think it would be difficult though for them to stick to PNH discussion only. So we just, staying on topic is so important to us. But if there was a good reason they gave us in their application process, we would probably let them in if they had a really good reason.
So as long as they have a overlapping disease, such as if they were diagnosed with PNH and MDS, then they would be welcome to join the group, as long as they have a diagnosis of PNH as well. And what about those that have had a transplant? Do you guys have many discussions about transplant in the group?
Jessi, do you want to address that?
Yeah, I think that's oftentimes a question that's posed in the beginning of someone's diagnosis. And so we've discussed that. We've also had people that are still on that I know that have had a bone marrow transplant that are still part of the group. And so when someone is questioning that or is going through it, then I know we try to link them up with other people that have gone through the same thing as well. But yeah, I definitely have seen people that have had bone marrow transplants on the site.
Is there an age requirement for the group? Do you have like a certain age? You must be 18 or older, or do you have an age requirement for the group?
It's funny that I do not think we do, but if there were somebody who was under the age of 18 who really wanted to join because they had like a parent or a sibling, I think we'd be kind to them. They could ask just as valid questions as anyone, but we haven't really encountered that before. But yeah, why not?
Thank you so much. Jessi, you had mentioned about the PNH committee. Would you like to go ahead and take some time to talk about the PNH committee and how it supports patients?
Yeah, so like I said, I've been part of this PNH patient committee for roughly 4 years, and our roles have kind of been the same and then switched a little bit too, but we're here to support patients with PNH. And when we used to have those face-to-face type interactions, we would go to conferences around the United States, and oftentimes we were the only other person there with these, with the people that had PNH, because it is so rare. So oftentimes you'd go to a face-to-face event and you'll see a lot more people that have AA or MDS, and maybe not as many people with PNH. So we would go to these meetings or conferences and be able to interact with them and share our story and have them share their story with us. And it was just a nice way to have that connection with somebody, because I remember what it was like for me the first time I met somebody with PNH, because we're not easy to find, especially if you're from a small town like I am. And so that's kind of where our role was, but we've always had this initiative to get people to go see a PNH specialist. And at first it started with, we would try to encourage you to go see a PNH specialist, and, and we would, pay, we had so much amount of funds to be able to pay to do that. And if I remember correctly, I think it started off with, if you had had one PNH, or if you had one grant gifted to you, then you couldn't reapply until, I don't know how much time went by, but it was kind of like we were trying to get people to see a PNH specialist. Now today it's changed. Today we offer the grant up to $500 for somebody to go see a PNH specialist one time per year, and that would cover the expense of somebody else traveling with them. And of course, there's a series of things that need to be filled out. And we also would need some documentation too of your PNH diagnosis. We would need documentation of your actual appointment prior to your appointment date. And then there's also a form that needs to be filled out, or an application that needs to be filled out on the AAMDS website.
Thank you so much. And, the PNH committee takes care of reviewing the applications. And Jessi, you guys reach out and contact folks who submit applications, correct?
Yep. So I'm one of the, my job on that committee is actually, I'm one of the people that does reach out to applicants. And it takes usually, can take up to 2 weeks for us to contact you, to kind of depending on if we have all the information that is required. And then we'll contact you, and then we'll just have a brief conversation. And so maybe I have some questions I need to get answered, or whatever that may be. And then we present that information back to the committee itself. So we try to set up some sort of meeting between our small committee, because it's not very big, but and then we discuss it, and if everything's filled out and it looks good, then we try to honor that up to that $500 mark as often as we can.
Thank you. And Marlena, the funds that support the PNH travel grants come from the PNH walk. And would you like to talk a little bit about the walk and how it got started and the ins and outs of that?
I have to unmute first. Can you hear me? Okay. The walk started, I think it's over 10 years now that we have been doing the walk. It's actually started in Florida. A patient, Erin Olivier, her dad has PNH. She had the first walk in Florida, where she lived at the time. And myself and Sarah Higgins, who ran the PNH Foundation at the time, decided to have a walk in New York and expand that. So we decided to do it and see if it would work. And we had a great turnout. And we've been doing it every year in Riverside Park in Manhattan since then. So we have it down to a science, and it's great fun. We've had people come from as far away as Brazil and other far-flung places. The nice thing too, that's the only walk I think AAMDS does that's, if I'm not mistaken, Leigh, that's dedicated to PNH patients, but there are other March for Marrow events all over the country. If you can't make it to New York City, it's in, I think, September, about around September 25th every year, which also coincides with PNH week. So we raise funds, and like you said, specifically for the fund that helps folks see a specialist.
How was the walk different this year?
Sorry, it was very different this year in that we were hoping and hoping and hoping that COVID would have gone away like by September, which is kind of funny to look back and realize that's what we thought. We were being really optimistic. The Parks Department decided that they weren't going to allow the events and any in-person event. They made the requirements so difficult that it would have been too hard. So we quickly at the very last minute did a virtual event in collaboration with AAMDS, and people marched around where they lived. They raised money, and it's funny. It was. We didn't have the chance to sit down and, have a sandwich with a friend or meet somebody new from a different state. But on the positive side, the virtual event allowed more people from all over the place to participate with virtually because we were all virtual.
So we have a question. When you were getting diagnosed, was it difficult for you to find a PNH specialist? And are you currently still seeing a PNH specialist?
I can go first. It might be helpful to hear from both of us because I think everybody's different.
Mhm.
So I was diagnosed by, at the time, the head of hematology at Beth Israel Hospital in New York City. Took him 2 weeks to figure out what was wrong with me when I was an inpatient. And when I was finished and I got, I was they let me go home. I sought out the support group and asked some questions that I think led the patients on the support group, the old one, not on Facebook, to say, you're not seeing a doctor who knows much about PNH, I think. Maybe you need to see this other doctor. And so it was hard because this doctor had saved my life. He and his team had taken such good care of me, and it was very difficult to go in and say, I've been told I have to see this guy named Dr. Ayrton at NYU. And it was like night and day. It was like he knew exactly what to do. He was the one who said, you actually have aplastic anemia, not just PNH. And the difference was huge. I was so glad that I broke up with that, even though I felt it was so hard to do. I felt guilty, but it was the best decision. So yeah, that's how I ended up with a specialist. Jessi, how about you?
Yeah, so I actually didn't even, so when I was diagnosed by a hematologist after seeing numerous specialists, and everybody said it wasn't them. And finally someone drew my blood and was like, oh, your hemoglobin's super low. So I ended up getting sent to a hematologist, and she ultimately diagnosed me, but even she never mentioned a PNH specialist to me. It wasn't until I actually went to my first conference and met people there that actually are now part of were and still are part of the PNH patient committee that explained the grant. And so that's when I actually realized, wait, what? There's specialists out there that aren't my hematologists. They're actually people that, are specifically, that we can specifically go and see. And so from there, I just kind of researched. I live in Michigan, and I'm kind of where, kind of in the middle between Grand Rapids and Lansing and Detroit. Like I'm kind of in that middle section. So there really isn't anybody in Michigan to go see. And so then it became, okay, Chicago or Cleveland. And I had heard great things about the Dr. Mack in Cleveland. Even though Chicago's a little bit closer to me, I decided to go to see Dr. Mack, and I absolutely love him. He's got a great sense of humor. His staff really cares. It's somebody too that keeps me in the loop. I go to see him twice a year. I only see my hematologist once a year. And so he's great at keeping me in the loop, but then also making this like puts you at ease. So he has a great manner about him, and he's very knowledgeable, and so is his staff. And I feel like when I go in there, even though I only see them a couple times a year, that they remember who I am, and they remember the people that I bring with me. Like my mom has come, or my fiance's come with me. So he remembers those people. So I highly encourage everybody to go see a PNH specialist.
Are there questions that now that you've been longer diagnosed that you wish you had known to ask when you were going for those first appointments? Kind of looking back, I wish I had known. What are those type of questions for somebody who's newly diagnosed that you would suggest is critically important that they make sure they're asking their doctors?
Oh, that's a good question. Marlena, do you want to take this one?
Let me unmute myself. Yeah, gosh. Things you should ask. You know, one of the things I wish, I know that the doctors don't want to scare you when you're newly diagnosed, but one of the things I wish I had a better view on was what disease progression may look like before my disease progressed. You know, what are the things that you should watch out for, or things that could happen? That would have been, I think, good to know. Although, you know, when you're first diagnosed, it's like the last thing you need to know is anything that's more scary. But I think shortly thereafter, perhaps, what that looks like, what are the complications that could possibly take place?
Jessi, anything to add?
I mean, I go back to those first few visits, or even the time between, because I went 9 months without even knowing that there was a PNH specialist even existed. Like, so at that time, I think, I'm trying to go back to my first visit with him, and I'm sure my mom would be able to tell you everything that was covered, but I can't remember. And some of the questions, because I felt like I was so overwhelmed that my mom was a lot better at asking those questions, because I know we had a list, but to be honest, I might have to loop back into that one.
I have one. I have another one. The AAMDS has probably my favorite publication that you guys put out, is how to read your labs and understand what the heck they mean. So I think maybe I would have asked, I mean, eventually I picked up on it. You're like, beginning, you're like, that it's just alphabet soup. You're like, I don't know what that means, but great. So I think that one of the first questions I would have asked is, can you help me understand what to look out for and what these labs mean, and maybe even get me that document. That would have been good to have early on.
So we have a question from the audience. They would like to know, have either of you experienced loss of memory, and is this a symptom that most people talk about with PNH?
Brain fog. I think the short answer, I don't know about loss of memory. I think I guess that's one way of saying it. Where you feel like you're not as sharp. I've definitely experienced that. Yeah, I have to take notes when I talk to people. Sometimes I'll even record things that are super important. I have my little hacks to get around the brain fog. It's tough. Sometimes you ask someone the same question that you asked them 3 days ago. You're like, I'm sorry. They're like, I told you that. And I'm like, yeah. How about you, Jessi?
Yeah, I definitely have brain fog. I actually just kind of went through this bout of not being able to get my meds. The beginning of November, my application had worn out, and anyways, I went quite a few weeks without it. And I will tell you, I have brain fog even on treatment, but when I was those weeks without treatment, it definitely came back in what I felt like was probably pretty close to full force of what I remember prior to being diagnosed and getting on treatment. I mean, even words that I've taught, I'm a teacher, so even things that I've taught for, 15 years now, I can have trouble recalling. So it's definitely a real thing. Brain fog is truly a real thing, and it's hard to put into words what it is that you're actually feeling, because it's different than being.
It's like tip of the tongue syndrome too. I call it tip of the tongue syndrome. I can't remember what the thing's called, or but in addition to just not remembering something, but it stinks. And it's not, it's not part of, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, ladies, it's not part of the clinical profile. It's like something all the doctors know exists, but it's not like documented.
Yeah, really. I would agree.
Yeah.
It's something we came up with. It's almost like we're we as PNHers came up with this description of what it is that goes on in our heads, because I remember that vividly before being diagnosed, and just being like, what is going on? Like, why am I having so much trouble remembering anything? But it's real. It is definitely real.
Mm-hmm.
After you were first diagnosed, and the treatment talks come about, your options, did you have some assistance in making some of those decisions? I mean, now we have a few treatments that are available. And have either of you made the switch from Soliris to using Ultomiris? And how did that go? And how did you make that decision on what was best for you to switch or not switch?
I did. I'm on treatment, and I made the switch to Ultomiris. I work full time. I think it was a really open and shut case for me. It was the difference between going every 2 weeks or I get home infusions. I think it's really important for everyone to know that you can ask if you're comfortable. Some people are scared of getting a home infusion, but if you're comfortable with trying it, it costs the insurance companies a lot less, and it can disrupt your life a lot less. The infusions are much shorter from start to finish, because you're not waiting for a busy infusion center to fill your medicine. But so I definitely have made the switch, mostly because it fits better with my busy life. Like Jessi, I also work full time, and every 2 weeks versus every 8 weeks, it's not really an argument. The other thing, if I might just kind of a miniature sidebar on that, I think that one thing that I hear sometimes from patients is that they don't want to go on any medication like Soliris or Ultomiris because they feel fine. And I felt fine too, but there's a lot that's happening inside your body that is the effects of having high LDH and of hemolysis and the impact on your organs, and the clotting that can happen. I had a significant improvement in the blood clotting that I was experiencing in my portal vein. So I've always been one of those people who pretty much felt fine. But once I learned that there's a lot more to treatment than just how you feel, that it really made the difference and made the decision for me. Jessi?
So I have not made the switch, but when I was first diagnosed, Soliris was the only option for me, either get on treatment or don't. And obviously from my sanity and where I was, I immediately was like, yes, sign me up. Yes, please. And had felt pretty normal, I think, for the first couple of years. It's been over the last few years, a couple of years too, that I have not always felt as wonderful as I think that I should. If I'm just being real, I think getting the infusion every 8 weeks sounds awesome. My fear was that because I continue to have symptoms even when I'm on Soliris, my fear was, what am I going to feel like at week 6, knowing that I still have 2 more weeks left until my next infusion. So for me, I guess the main deciding factor at this time is I know my body. I know that I'm still having symptoms, and it just worried me if this is going to be something that I'm going to feel even worse for a week or 2 prior to having my infusion. And being a teacher, that worries me. So I have not made the switch. But I've heard good, I knew Marlena had, so I know a lot of people have, but I personally have not yet.
And we have a question. PNH is complicated. How did you explain to family and friends your diagnosis, especially since PNH patients, you don't look sick?
Invisible illness.
Yes.
Everybody, I feel like, Jessi, I don't know if you agree, everyone gets their elevator speech of explanation, and it's probably different from patient to patient. The way I have explained it to family and friends is that I have a rare blood disease where my red blood cells are missing a protein, so my immune system destroys them.
Mhm.
So that's why I feel bad and I'm anemic and I need medicine. That is like a gross oversimplification, but pretty much my short answer.
I think that mine's probably, very similar. Like especially when you first meet somebody, or when you're working or in relationships, and you begin to tell them like what it is that you suffer from. I think the explanation is pretty similar for me too. Pretty short and sweet. That makes a lot of sense. I'm not going to go into the ins and outs of everything. I do think I also spend some time talking about my symptoms and what they look like. I know once, people I work with closely, and even my students, like they can tell, and I know I do this, but I'll put my hand to my chest, like if I start getting shortness of breath, or I feel like my heart's beating rapidly, I'll tend to put my hand on my chest and sit down. I don't always have to communicate that, but I do think it's important to let others know what your symptoms are, because you do know your body, and we do look very normal. But the way that I explain the actual PNH is exactly pretty verbatim of what Marlena said. So
we have another question. Before COVID, did either of you have concerns about flying? Just with the elevation and sitting in a plane, there's always the concern about blood clots for PNH patients. And how did you address the flying?
Jessi, do you want to take that one or go first?
Oh, I definitely can. Okay, I love to travel, and that was actually one of my biggest concerns with the blood clots and everything. When I was, before I was diagnosed, I actually flew quite far. I had gone to Italy and Germany, and didn't have any, I didn't suffer any abnormalities or anything. And that was before I even knew I was diagnosed with PNH. I fly quite a bit. It doesn't bother me at all. I think what we try to do is, one of us who I'm flying with is sitting on the end, but even if not, that's okay too. But I'll get up. I usually will get up and I'll walk the what do you call that? The lane, I don't know, the middle lane there, or sometimes I might even, if it's a longer flight too, stand at the end of the row and kind of do these kind of leg lift type things too, if I don't feel like walking down the lane and stuff. But those are the types of things I do. But my body's weird though. After I fly, I tend to have a symptom where I feel not look like I'm a lot more tired. It's really bizarre. That's the main symptom that I have after I fly is like the next day I'll probably sleep in and then I'll require a nap at some point and then I'm back to normal. But so for me, as far as blood clots or anything, I fly 3 or 4 times, 5 times a year. So I mean, I haven't had any side effects from that.
Oh, Marlena, anything to add or?
No, just about the same. My doctor, my hematologist says, just please get up and walk around. And I try to also stretch. I try to wear compression stockings sometimes, but I feel like an old lady, so I got to get over that. I think I remember soon after diagnosis, my husband and I were going on vacation to Jamaica, and I think Dr. Ayrton was alarmed. He's like, don't drink the water, stand up and walk around and close your mouth when you shower. That was the best. I was like, but yeah, but I'm a clot prone person. So just trying to move, pretty much the same as Jessi.
Marlena, you had mentioned about the progression of symptoms. So we have a question about that. What are some of the progression of symptoms that patients may need to know about, or some of those things that you or Jessi have experienced?
Yeah. So because I get blood clots, a known potential progression for PNH patients is as Budd-Chiari syndrome, which I developed over time. And I have portal vein hypertension in my liver. So it's causing liver damage. And I actually I gained a new specialist in the process. So now I not only have a hematologist, I have a hepatologist. So monitoring that. So that's one place you can end up. And it actually, to be honest, can end up feeling a little more scary than the PNH sometimes. So that's just something, and that's not that uncommon. I wish I had a figure of what % of patients end up with Budd-Chiari, but I'd say completely casual, like based on how many I meet, I don't know, maybe only 10 to 20% at the most. But that is a complication that can occur. And I'm trying to think of others, Jessi. I don't know if you like other things that can happen as a result. Clots are definitely something to be aware of. People could end up with getting like a pulmonary embolism. You have to be careful. Like if your leg feels puffy and hot, you have to go to the doctor. If you have a migraine or a headache, that's the worst headache you've ever had in your entire life, go to the doctor. It could be, just blood clots are scary and to be avoided, and something that I don't want to scare anybody, but just to be more informed.
I think Jessi kind of said it best. You know your body, and if you're feeling something's wrong with your body, then you probably need to get some assistance. So we do have a question regarding COVID. Are there conversations that happen in the Facebook group with people expressing concerns and assistance? Because I think that's a hot topic for everyone, and especially for patients. Is that something that you guys discuss in the group?
Yeah.
About people's feelings and concerns?
Yes. We have had patients sharing their experience of having COVID as a PNH patient. Unfortunately, we've had people who've gone through it, people who are concerned about it, and even the information, which is not, I don't think it's been clinically proven out, but there is even potential evidence that by being on a C5 inhibitor, which is Soliris or Ultomiris, you actually have added protection against COVID. So yeah, we talk about it for sure.
Jessi, anything to add?
No, not really. I was going to say definitely, and especially in the beginning, I remember there was a lot of threads coming through in regards to COVID, and they still do definitely pop up, and people are willing to share their story. There are PNHers that have had COVID, and they're openly share them. But yeah, I don't really have anything more to add. She covered everything I was going to say.
And we do have a question. Is there ever the topic of pregnancy that is discussed within the group? And does the group have women who have gone on to have successful pregnancies that folks could connect with within the PNH patient Facebook group?
Jessi, do you want to do this one?
Yeah, sure, I can.
I don't want to talk all the time.
No, you're fine, but you probably, I mean, you see a lot more on the PNH or on the Facebook than I do. But no, there's definitely always people posting about that. That's actually another, I think, pretty regular thread that comes through. And I know personally have met several women who have had successful pregnancies while or after being diagnosed with PNH. And sometimes their pregnancy leads them to the diagnosis of PNH. And so they realize they're pregnant and they're like, oh my goodness, I have this life-threatening disease. And then they find out about this group. And so it's great because oftentimes some fears can be lifted when you get to talk to other women that have had pregnancies. So I personally have not, but yeah, it's definitely a topic that's out there and women that are willing to talk and share their stories.
Marlena, anything to add? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, I'm on mute. Not really. That's exactly right. It definitely is something that's discussed quite a bit because it's, the people who, by and large, what is it? The average age of diagnosis is in your 30s. So a lot of people are thinking of starting families around then. And so it's a question that does come up a lot. And, it's really wonderful that, that people can, with the treatments on the market now, can have successful pregnancies. When I was diagnosed, it was like 2 years before any therapies were on the market. And the word for women was don't try it. You could get it could take you right back to where all the progress you've made could be lost. You could re-trigger your aplastic anemia and get sick and have horrible things can happen. So the doctors really didn't want you to. Now it's on the table. So that's great.
And we have a question. Have either of you participated in a clinical trial?
Not me.
I didn't hear the question. You were freezing for me for whatever reason.
Oh, sorry. The question was, have either of you participated in a clinical trial?
No, I have not.
And, Marlena or Jessi, for inside the patient Facebook group, is there discussions about clinical trials? So if somebody was looking to connect with somebody who's a PNH patient, are there threads in the group that they could connect with others in the group?
Yes. And you know what? I just realized after we've been talking now for a while that I didn't even say what the address was for the group. May I?
Yep, that was next. Thank you.
It's facebook.com. Here's the short way. Facebook.com/PNH patients. Or if you go to Facebook and you search for PNH patients support, it'll probably come up if you type in PNH patients as well. But that should help. But yeah, people they talk about clinical trials as much as they're able to. I think when you're on a clinical trial, they don't really want you talking too much about what's happening. But I think people provide limited information and their experiences.
Great, thank you. And for, are there parents in the group as well? Parents who have children with PNH? Are they able to gain access to meet others in the group of other parents?
Yes, I just spoke to someone last week who has a teenager who just was diagnosed, and there are others there as well. So it's a great place for anyone whose life has been touched by this disease.
Thank you. And for finding a specialist, Jessi, how did you go about finding a specialist? And also for you, Marlena, did you search on your own or did you have referrals? How did you go about finding a specialist?
I had patients tell me. Go ahead, Jessi.
That's exactly how, yeah. So I had other people that had PNH. When I went to that one conference, that was like, okay, where do you live? Okay, these are the ones that are close, but I'm telling you, this guy's great in this area if you're able to travel there. So, I mean, everybody is really very willing to help. And I think too, when we were, but now it's virtual, but when we had those conferences, we were able to listen to other specialists too. So that also opened up other doors when you'd hear them. But I would say I found mine from a recommendation from somebody else that had PNH.
Yep.
Even though you've been diagnosed for a while, do you still find the need to just keep educating yourself about PNH? Are you still keeping up with the latest in research? Even though you're on treatment, and what's the value in patients continuing to educate themselves?
Gosh, I'm still, I have big hope. I'm still hoping for a cure one of these days. So yeah, I definitely watch the research and the headlines. There's so much new developments though. It's almost mind-boggling. It used to be you'd see an article about PNH a couple times a year and share it with people. Now it seems like there's a new press release every day. That's an exaggeration, by the way. But it's frequent. So I also think that part of the reason I'm still hanging out with a lot of PNH patients, besides the moral support it gives, is I think the opportunity to give back, because I know what it feels like when you're desperate and searching for answers. And I think it's really important for the more veteran patients to pay it forward and keep that going.
Jessi?
What was the initial question again? It was a great way to end it. I was so enthralled with your response, Marlena. I'm sorry.
As someone who's been diagnosed with PNH for a while, do you still continue to try to keep yourself educated regarding PNH? What are some things that you maybe do to help yourself keep up on the latest of what's going on?
Yeah, definitely. I think the PNH support group on Facebook is awesome at doing that. I know that, another shout out to Michael Nover. I see him. He's on top of that kind of stuff, and also and showing fact versus fiction. I think too is a great thing he does for the Facebook group.
That's true.
Yeah, and also I'm part of I get newsletters from AAMDS. I'm also get some stuff from in regards from Rare Patient Voice sometimes sends me their newsletters. I mean, there's different things out there that I belong to that I try to keep up to date with on different things that are going on with PNH, because it's great to see that people are actually paying attention. And I've even had people discuss with me about the importance of having our hematologist or our primary care, or whoever it is that you see that's not a PNH specialist that you see on a regular basis, and how important it is that they understand what we're going through too, I think helps me. So if I am doing my own research too, but that I can communicate those things to my hematologist, because I don't know about anybody else, but my hematologist is the only person she's ever diagnosed with PNH, and I'm still the only person. So I end up telling her more information than she's able to give to me. So I definitely try to keep up with it.
We do have a question, and it says, does the group ever create a get-together to meet with other PNH patients?
We have. When COVID started, we need to do it again. We had a couple Zoom calls where we could hang out and catch up. We actually were talking about having like a weekly set time, and which we still might do. It's kind of hard to find a time that works for everyone, including from Los Angeles to UK to Australia. but yeah, and you know, when it's not COVID time, I personally have gotten together to meet people for coffee, who I've met online and I like it when people come to the walk so I can put faces to names and meet people in real life. I'm sure there's some of that going on, and well, at least I should say, I hope that there's some of that going on that I'm not even aware of, of people who become friendly and support each other, maybe, you know, over private message even, and get to know each other.
And I think Jessi had mentioned earlier, just like attending the AAMDSIF conferences is a great opportunity, you know, when we're able to meet in person again, you know, to be able to meet people face to face and not only learn from the PNH experts, but to be able to have that great connection of meeting with people face to face. So, you know, there's invaluable to be able to do that. Hopefully we'll all be able to do that again really soon. Yep, go ahead, Marlena.
I just was going to say, Jessi, if it's not too difficult to do, did we also let people know how if they want to apply? I don't know if we did.
Yeah.
I mentioned that there is a form on the AAMDS website that they can fill out.
Absolutely. So we're almost at the hour. Is there any last advice or anything that you would like to let the audience know about supports for PNH patients that you think are valuable and that folks would like to know about?
I end with a message of encouragement and positivity. You know, it's not the best thing that could happen to you, but it's definitely not the worst either. So we're really, really lucky to be alive in an era where having PNH is not a death sentence. 100 years ago, I probably wouldn't be here anymore. But there's wonderful treatments and doctors who really know what's going on. So that's all I have to say.
I would just encourage everybody to, I mean, if Facebook feels comfortable for you, join the Facebook group, reach out to us if you need any additional support. I know that oftentimes when they see somebody from Michigan, I'm an immediate flag and they'll tag me in that thread and I'll contact people. I just want everybody to know you're not alone. I mean, if you're a parent, a husband, a wife, a child, whatever, there's other people out there like you that are dealing with the same thing. Because I know not only being somebody that has PNH, but then also realizing the amount of worry and support that goes with being somebody who cares for somebody with PNH. There's also that could seem kind of lonely as well. So there's a ton of us available. And yeah, you're not alone. You're really not. And we understand.
Thank you so much, Marlena and Jessi, for sharing your time and your expertise with all of us this evening. If you would like to watch this webinar again at a later time, it will be available on our website within 2 to 3 business days. If you have any additional questions, you can send it to us in 3 ways. You can email our help account, which is help@aamds.org. Call our helpline at 800-747-2820, extension 2, or submit your question on our Facebook page. And if you would like a direct link to the Facebook page the PNH Patients Facebook page. Please also email our help account. We're happy to help you get directly connected with the group. On behalf of the Aplastic Anemia and MDS International Foundation, I'd like to thank you for joining us this evening, making us your resource of choice for information on bone marrow failure diseases. The AAMDSIF Medical Advisory Board and team are always here to support you and your family, as we have done for the past 36 years. This concludes our program. Thank you, guys.
Bye.